live.
Good morning, this is Bryan Betz. We are here with Andy Littleton and Eric Siepen, talking faith over breakfast.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're and by here, we're in Tucson, Arizona.
Tucson, Arizona.
At
Exo Breakfast.
Yeah, at Exo Coffee.
Exo Coffee.
And the Southern Arizona Workspace behind Exo, where they serve breakfast.
Oh, that's
and it's
fantastic.
delicious.
This is my first time here, so I'm still learning the ways about Tucson. There's all these different little wonderful places hidden and some more obvious that I've still never even been to.
Yeah.
So Exo was one of the places I always wanted to go to, so I'm glad I finally came.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of the more hidden spots, especially the workspace in back. You know, very few people realize you can come back here and have breakfast and kind of have an office all to yourself in a way, and just get work done in a cool spot.
Yeah, how long have they had this? Like, because I always thought it was just a little front thing.
Yeah, and it was. Under a year, for sure. Yeah, or near a year at this point, but not that long. This is an addition to the space up front. It's connected, but also separate. Separate name, separate function. All that. So, yeah, we're here, and Bryan, our host, walks in today. He's comes straight from work and announces that he got a ride because he fell asleep at the wheel last night and totaled his car.
Yes.
And then here he is ready to podcast, and we're still trying to wrap our minds around this.
Oh, no, yeah, I work late night to early mornings, and halfway through my shift, probably the earlier half of the shift, I had to go pick something up in my car. And on my way back, I fell asleep at the wheel, blacked out, whatever it was, and I hit a curb awkwardly and possibly something else. I cannot remember at all. And
maybe an animal.
Yeah, right in. Yeah, probably. No, hopefully not. I had to park right in front of the security forces building. Thankfully, it was dark. Nobody saw it. So I had to let them know, hey, I have to keep my car here for a little bit. And then I went back to work, and I worked. And then I got a ride here, thankfully, and I was able to make it in time for this podcast.
And so I'm thinking, folks, in the future, my voice will probably sound a little bit higher, a little bit less mature. Today I've got a scratchy throat. I don't know. There's a lot of allergy stuff going around. But I actually debated this morning when I woke up about not coming in. I thought, I'm just going to call Eric and Bryan and tell them, hey, you guys get to know each other, but I'm just not doing well. And then I show up and find out Bryan, was in a ditch and his car is totaled, and here he is.
I think you're making it sound like it's gone from he's parking in front of a security place to he's in a ditch.
Rolled over eight times.
But my very first car accident, I was actually hit by a bus on the interstate. Everyone was going 75, and then I hit a couple other cars, ended up on the opposite end of the intersection.
What?
Someone was in front of me, and they started slowing down, and they were just kind of driving crazy, and I didn't feel safe behind them. So I went to switch lanes. I was clear. Blind spot was fine. They stopped and suddenly in front of me. So I did more to compensate and miss them, and I kind of hit the bus.
Ooh. And
spun all around. Like I said, hit a couple cars, and that was in the middle of the night on my way back from Phoenix to Tucson. And then I went to work, and I worked all day that day. And they knew that I was in a car accident. They didn't know the details, and then they found out the details, and I was on bed rest for the week. And the doctor wanted to put me on a 30-day no standing for more than an hour waiver. But I distracted her, and I did not take that. So this is becoming longer than I intended to. But they had to brief the rest of work and say, hey, if you get hit by a bus, don't come into work.
Yeah.
So I've never been the reason someone had a safety brief, so I felt really honored.
I feel like I need to say right now, as far as on behalf of the Faith Over Breakfast podcast, which is a very big organization, that in the future, if you get into a car accident, you don't have to come in and podcast.
But I would like to say that this shows that our new radio podcast host is he's badass. I mean, I excuse my language there for pastor, but that's what I'm going to say. That's what he is. Our new host is awesome.
I don't want to say. I'm not going to confirm or deny that.
You must work for the government.
I'm an aircraft mechanic.
There we go. That's awesome.
I was thinking about it. I had a 4-day weekend this past weekend. I was going crazy. And I went to bed at 6 on Friday and Saturday in the evening.
Yeah.
But it's not like I had a lot going on otherwise. If I can keep busy, but I was just thinking about it. I don't think I could ever retire. Yeah. If I'm not working an official job, I'm never going to not work on something. So.
Yeah.
Well, you have the podcast in your future, so we're happy to have you.
Well, I appreciate it. Do you think either of you would ever stop what you're doing or stop working?
I probably not. I mean, I think it would change. I'm already recognizing a couple things. So I'm in my big bad mid-30s, but I'm starting to need more sleep. Just starting to not be able to push as hard as I used to push. I used to, really I would. To get something done, stay up all night, stay up late, just whatever it took. And now I'm starting to think a little differently because I think, my week, that's going to affect the next 3 days if I try to do something like that. So I'm getting a little slowing down, but at the same time, I'm the type of guy that I keep having ideas and, getting involved and stuff. And I don't foresee that changing when I'm older. I think I'm just going to have to take it in small doses. I don't know. Eric? You're ready to retire now.
Yeah, I know I'm ready to retire right now. No, I don't think, there's any retirement in the future for small church pastors in general. Yeah. I don't have a great retirement package unless I develop it, and I'm not paid a lot. I'm usually, until recently, under the poverty level. So, retiring is not an option. But on the other end of it, I don't think I'd ever stop doing it until I just can't do it anymore. Yeah. Or people tell me, you have to stop, we just can't handle you anymore. But I think, too...
Which could happen.
Yeah. That doesn't mean there isn't, the moments where I'd like to just quit doing it. Because being a pastor, in particular, in a smaller church, you don't get to specialize. And so I don't get to, I clean toilets, and I also preach sermons, and I also clean the building, and I do a lot of different things alongside everybody else. And so... sometimes you think, man, I don't want to have all these switchings around. I'd like to just focus on this one thing and get better at this, Yeah. It's mostly cleaning toilets because that doesn't involve people.
So you'd like to get a lot better at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the ones where
learn
people
some
can't
things about people.
Me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, there is a level of competition in the sense, not with other churches, but the competition with Netflix and Minecraft and all those kinds of things is you're competing for people's attention with a message. And it's an eternal message, but people are used to being entertained, and when you can't always be entertaining or even want to be entertaining, it's difficult. And I mean, Bryan here, he came to my church once, and guess what? He ended up at your church, so I would say I lost the competition. So
I love that we didn't know that. We didn't realize that until right now.
Yeah, I know.
Or a little bit ago.
Well, to go for I was committed to another church at the time, and I did love your church. So,
but it was weird.
It was so weird.
Yeah.
I couldn't even. No.
Yeah, so this is something I wanted to talk about. First, I should say, if you heard a subtle crunch over the last couple minutes, that's because there was crunching because I was eating, because this is Faith Over Breakfast.
Faith Over Breakfast.
And somehow, Eric couldn't, he downed his food before this happened. He's a hungry guy. He gets up early, one of those workaholic pastor types, waking up at 5 a.m. Bryan, I don't know. He's had a traumatic morning. Day.
Yeah, I didn't have an appetite.
No.
It was just too difficult. No, I didn't know about that menu that you looked out of, and I didn't want to rush my decision, so I'll probably get something later.
Good. Well, you should, because this was the savory breakfast sandwich from XO, and it was super good, and it was on barrio bread, and it was tasty, and it was awesome, and it came with some orange slices.
I'm probably going to get it next, actually, after we're done.
That's a good call. That's a very, very good call. So, but from there, so you visited the Village. So
yes.
Eric's church is called the Village. Some guy started a church called the Village. His name's Matt Chandler, and he obviously didn't know the Village had already been taken here in Tucson, Arizona. How long ago did you guys start the Village?
2001.
2001, the year I graduated high school. Wow.
Yeah. I try not to talk about that on this podcast.
Man, you guys are old. Eric and his co-pastor Rod started the Village in 2001, and our church is called Mission Church. I'm one of the pastors of Mission Church, so we're representing 2 churches here in Tucson, and so there is something in common about them, is that you walk in and it's not quite just your average Sunday morning, like what you grew up with church, and it's on a spectrum. But tell us about you, Bryan. You've been to both. You're now the subject of this whole podcast, by the way. You thought you were just going to pitch in, but yeah, you tell us briefly about. Yeah, like what's the same, what were you just like, yeah, that's church. And then a couple things that you went, that's different.
Growing up in the church, I've experienced so many different churches. And while the Village Church, Eric Siepin's church, is probably more unconventional,
yes.
We're just going to pause for that train that comes on by in our podcast.
I was just waiting. I was just immediately going to jump right in.
That train graphic that I just cut in there means that Bryan's about to make a very valid point. The train's coming.
I'm surprised that we don't put that in every single comment I make, but it's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair. No, I feel like I grew up in a Foursquare church initially when I was younger, like as a kid, and it was kind of very, very similar. My parents were the worship leaders for it at the time, and I really loved that church. It was there's more young people at your church than the Foursquare church, but I started going later in life to a church that was more like Andy Littleton's, the Mission Church. So. And I've been to so many different. When I lived in Alabama for a short time as well. So I've just visited a lot of different churches. I'm really thankful that I've been able to. So I've been able to really see the value of it. I learned really quickly that when I was going to like a mega church, that one of the things that was said that we're not your grandpa's church, and I was really taken aback. It really kind of didn't sit well with me, like as if that didn't have value because it was their grandpa's church.
Yeah.
While God is still able to impact just as much in that church as the young people's church, hypothetically.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful that there are so many different kinds of churches, and the church that I was committed to at the time when I had visited yours, it's very more the conventional church, and I loved your church, but I didn't want to stray away from that, so I apologize. But
you don't have to explain yourself.
Yeah. But so what was the question, really quick?
Well,
he was really afraid not to offend me.
I
So
know.
he was really
he was being careful. The train came by and all that
sure.
stuff.
But I wanted
he wants
to
keep the hosting job.
Right. I think he does.
Yeah, and this is my first time, No, but I really just, more importantly, just wanted to say that, like, there is value in all these different churches.
Sure.
And some people feel just more at home and more connected into these different churches.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I've become convinced, especially over the last few years of church planting, that we need just a variety of unique churches because there's so many types of people with all of their quirks and needs and hopes and the church, whatever church they find isn't going to meet them all, but at least like you could take down a couple walls for folks and we thought about that when we started Mission. Is we thought very specifically about groups of people in our city that we didn't see in the church, and we kind of asked questions about, what would they like. That, not that we want to cater our message or change who we say God is or anything like that, but what are just some things that make them feel at home? Or what are some things that they would connect with well? And so we thought about some of the local businesses where we saw those people, and we said, let's go learn from them. Let's think about the way that they present their leadership. So one of the ones is, Trader Joe's was one. That's not a local business, but it's one that we saw that the people in our community who we wanted to reach love Trader Joe's. And we saw that within there, the leaders, they look just like everybody else. And that's, a key factor is kind of the servant leadership idea at Trader Joe's. And so, if you're interacting with the manager of the store, they look just like the person checking you out at the register or picking up the carts. They don't look different. They don't act different. They don't talk different, even though they might have greater responsibility. And so we learned something from that. And then we looked at one of our local bookstores and a couple of our local coffee shops and saw that they let kids kind of run around a little bit. It wasn't quite as structured and like stick the kids over there. And so we said, let's be a little more freeform with some of that. And then we just saw Tucson's been rated really high on just the food. Like we have great food and people love to eat. And so we thought, hey, we should make great dinner and we should just have food and eat together every week. So we didn't go out trying to be the anti-church, which we were deemed recently by a friend of yours, I should say. But we did think about some things that we just said, hey, what can we do to make people feel at home and really minister to them well? And then what about the village, Eric? You guys describe yourself, like if you were to say like what sets the village apart, or a few things.
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, obviously we're a lot older than Mission Church. We started in 2001. Yeah. And I would have to say at some level we did set out in the beginning to be anti-church. But part of that, like you, Brian, I grew up in the church and found that the people that were my friends, they didn't go to church. They weren't followers of Jesus. And they weren't coming to the almost mega church I was going to. It was about 1,000 people. And I was working in college in singles ministry. And it just, everything about that church and my experience in church did not fit the culture. And so we did set out at some level to do that. But on the other hand, we also set out to be relatively authentic in the sense of, Rod and I created a church that I would like to go to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with, especially when you're planting a church, you need to be comfortable with what you're offering, but also to try to move away from this idea that we have a mission. We got to create a mission statement. Like, Jesus gave us a mission. Every church has the exact same mission. It's the Great Commission. We're supposed to make disciples, and we're supposed to go. We've got that. So there has to be a set of values. And as we tried to create a church that was built on a value system so that its external things could change. If community is a value, it doesn't necessarily matter how it represents itself as long as it's authentic to the community that's there together. So you don't have your doctrinal structure is going to have to be a little bit more loose, because when you have a bigger, stronger doctrinal structure, you end up really controlling a lot of the aspects of how things are done and presented, and you'd be surprised how much doctrine affects philosophy. And so you got to be careful if you're going to be inclusive, which is difficult, and there are a lot of issues that I suspect we'll get into in this podcast as to how uncomfortable you become in these churches like Mission Church and the Village. I think some of the things when people walk in that think, oh, this is different, is we've got couches. Yeah. Our entire church is centered around our kitchen and what we call the living room. We write our own music, which is, it's different kind of music. It's probably, you'd hear it more maybe in the early, or late 70s punk scene, or a little bit of folk, but it doesn't have any of that, a lot of the worship rhythm to it. So some people really like it because they're used to it, and other people are, it's just abrasive and it's hard for them. So
yeah. And you've had people, I remember Rod telling me, people that have come to the church and just said, would you please do other music, or we love it if the music were different. And
Yeah.
you guys have just said no.
Well, yeah, and we say, like, you know, there are plenty of churches who offer all of what you want there. I mean, we're like the one who doesn't, and so we're just willing to die on that, not because we think everybody else is bad. We use other communities' worship music, but it's usually communities that are producing their own locally. I think there's a strong value in just the local expression. So we're willing to sacrifice actually some good music for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then the other thing that Eric and I both get is just when we're out and about. I get it all the time where people will be surprised that I'm a pastor. And so, first of all, Brian, hey, are you surprised that we're pastors at all? If you were just to meet us, if you were just to walk into this coffee shop, would you look at us at the table and go, the pastors?
From, I would say, Christian, if I implemented like in terms of a Christian culture perspective,
right,
and growing up in the church, no.
Right.
But just me personally, yes. But that's just because of my experiences.
Because you've had a wide variety of church experience, which I actually relate to that. I have too. But then a lot of people we bump into, it's like, no, we've been to 2 churches our whole life, and they look like this.
Yeah.
And it's not, Eric and I are not nuts. We're not crazy people.
No, but I will tell you that I recently went to lunch with one of the guys from our church who's a stockbroker, and, you know, he's in a 3-piece suit. Yeah. And I think it was one of my worst days, and my hair's sticking out everywhere, and I got a bandana on, and I threw a T-shirt and shorts on, and I thought, man, if somebody walked by and said, "Who's the pastor?" and they'd be like, "Oh, it's definitely the guy in the suit. He must have picked that guy up off the street." You know? So there is a little bit of that.
Yeah. And I actually honestly love that. I mean, I think so. For me, I have a business as well, and, you know, work with a couple other guys, and so, you know, a lot of people meet me in that context of, you know, working on the build out of their restaurant or the dining table in their house or whatever. And so, you know, we have that rapport, that interaction. And then, so when I'm out and about in the community, you know, it really is all entangled. Like, I could be meeting with somebody to talk about their walk with Jesus, and then about 30 minutes later, I'm giving somebody a quote, you know, on redoing their wall. So I actually love that tension, because I don't know. I often did feel like I loved a lot of my pastors growing up, you know. But when they walked into a room, there was kind of someone different has arrived, you know. And I love being able to interact without that wall going up and without that barrier. And that's not super intentional. I mean, I'm just kind of what I do. But I've enjoyed, you know, when people have said, I don't know, there's something about it when they go, "Oh, you're a pastor." But it's not like, "Oh, shoot, you know, you're a pastor." Like, "Oh no, I'm so ashamed." But it's just more of a, oh, sweet, you know, I didn't realize that, didn't expect it. And then we tested this podcast before in a really loud environment.
Yes, we've tested a couple times.
But Eric, you know, what you were saying something kind of like you just said, like, I think the first time you said, people tend to think you're on drugs.
Yeah. Well, it was easy.
Not to bring that up or anything.
No, but like when I was down in this part of town, our church was actually we were up on 4th Avenue for a long time in the YMCA, the Muse, the old YMCA building, before they knocked it down for all of the condos and everything. Yeah. So I would just walk the streets, and I guarantee you, I could walk up and down 4th Avenue. I don't know how many times people ask me, do I have this? Do I have cigarettes? Do I have, you know, a little marijuana? Can I have it? I mean, they didn't say it that way, but that's what they were asking for. Because I just look like a guy who does that.
You were like, "Weed and coke have I none, but that which I have give I thee."
Yeah.
And you broke into a real pastor moment, right?
Unfortunately, I'm not as cool as you, but I just plot down and chat. I don't have that much Jesus going for me.
Neither do I. I'm sorry. I always get this. "Oh, you do woodworking." So Christ-like.
Wow, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So there's
Definitely.
There's that. Yeah. Well, and I love it. I mean, I love that. I don't know. I just love the fact that you're out and about in the community, and that I've bumped into you so many times in the past at coffee shops. I mean, I remember one time I looked over and you were just breaking out a board game at a coffee shop with some folks from your church.
Yep.
And it's awesome, and I love that that your activity when you're out and about with people isn't like it's not like you're on this discipleship mission in which you're bringing pamphlets and you're dressed your best and you're trying to sell them something, but you're spending time and you're a friend, and you're a neighbor, and you're a board game maker.
Yeah, I am. I have one published board game. That's true. I forget that because nobody's bought it. But yeah.
Oh man. Well, hey, pump it on the podcast. What?
I'll pump it on a different podcast. Maybe we can have an entire podcast about my board game.
Okay.
That'll give us something to do.
That'd be
next week.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
Does the board game, is it ever a sermon illustration? Do you ever
When I first published it, I would just pause my sermons and do public service announcements for my board game. Because, I'm sure that there's probably some illegal part about that, promoting your... But it took me 9 years to develop, so I figured...
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a good...
And aren't there people, like members of the church community are, part of the game?
Yes. So when you order the game, it comes with 7 characters.
Yeah.
And I changed the rules. We have a chaplain, and I changed the rules to include a chaplain in the context of the game. But yes, you can buy an expansion pack, which has about 50 of the people in our community.
Really?
That you can be if you want.
Man, with 3D printing, you should add for another $100. They can just put themselves in the game.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
and then I could really make the.
That's right. And then you'll be above the poverty level.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. I don't even know what we were talking about anymore. We were talking about...
just being pastors that don't look like pastors, Brian.
One of the things that I wanted to add than ask, something that I love about both of your churches is, and you talked about kind of free form, just the freedom that there is just to be yourself in those places. And I was curious if there's a temptation to be unique and individualistic for the sake of being that, or just trying to not get wrapped up in being so unique and so separate and different from other churches. And I never had this thought when I was at either of your churches either. I've never felt that way when I was there or interacting with either of you, but I was wondering if there's ever been that temptation.
Yeah, and I don't think. I mean, really, honestly, neither of our churches are that crazy. I mean, they're not.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah,
mine's crazy.
But in many ways, I mean, it's even some of the stuff that looks different is. I mean, it's a very ancient practice, just packaged just a little bit different. And in a lot of the churches that people grew up used to, that was a repackaging of an ancient practice but they just happen to grow up with it. So I don't feel like either of us are that wild. I mean, I think both churches have been really thoughtful and intentional, and actually we're both pretty liturgical if you really get down to it, and we're thought through. So it's not like we're just going out there just trying to promote ourselves to the world. I mean, we've thought hard about how we are going to do things, and even the things that are different, why they are, and what the point is. But in all that, yeah, I mean, there's always a temptation. I mean, there's also a temptation to be doctrinal for just the sake of being doctrinal, or or being charismatic for the sake of being charismatic. And so, if we were going to be individual, or if we really wanted to run with the anti-church or the hippie church, or we could do that just to be noticed and seen, rather than for actually loving the people in our community. And I think that temptation is always there, no matter what you're bent. And so, I do sense it sometimes where I want people to have a certain impression of the church. And that depends, because I'm all over the place. So my heart's such a mess that one person wants the church to be this way, all of a sudden I want it to be that way for them, and then somebody else wants it to be another way, and all of a sudden I want it to be that way for them, and I have to step back and go, wait, okay, God, is this me walking with you, or is this me wanting people to like my church? And that's sad. I kind of repent of that. So I don't know.
Well, I don't know if I could claim to be as holy as you, Andy, when it comes to those things. But no, because I think at some level, maybe when you are a prophetic church, and I don't mean in a sense of offering prophecy, but when you have a form of critique on existing church, there is you are also trying to demonstrate what you think things should look like. And so there is an element of separateness from the body itself. And so you find yourself, and a lot of people in my community find themselves, it's difficult to interact with the Christian culture, or they feel a tension with the Christian culture, and because there is a strong critique in the community of what's happening in the culture.
Right.
So as we've grown, and my church is about, I'd say, with kids and everything, around 110 to 120 people. Like, as we've grown, there are people who really, like, for instance, love The Shack. I think The Shack was a great movie, and there are other people who have just find it as one of the worst things that Christian culture has ever produced,
right?
And just find it really bad. I think I had one experience that really helped me understand things was when we were here downtown. There was a young woman who went to our church, and she walked up while I was talking about the purpose-driven life to somebody else, and I was in my great, awesomeness, bashing the book as to its value.
Someone asked you for a cigarette, and you said, "Let me tell you about the purpose-driven life."
Church, yeah, it was something like that. and this will give you the context of my church at the time. She said, "Oh, no, that's a great book. I broke into a car and stole that and became a Christian."
Whoa.
And I had that moment of like, okay, yes, there may be some things that I have that I disagree with in that book, or the way it kind of contributes to the larger culture.
Right.
But God is very powerful, and He uses anything. And you should shut up, Eric. And that was it was early on in my ministry, but it was very, like, I don't forget that, because I felt like God was saying, was tempted to be unique for the sake of being unique, and be kind of antagonistic for maybe more the sake of being antagonistic than helpful to the larger community of God. So that's how I'd answer that question.
I don't know why you'd say you're less holy than me.
Well, I had to have the holiness kind of scraped into me.
Well, my church has barely begun, so I'm sure that's going to happen. It was funny. An extended family member, sister-in-law's brother, is planning a church in the Boston area, and so he's smart, sharp guy, and he's in one of the more traditional denominations, but trying to do kind of a ministry with Bostonians and people who are skeptical. So this guy became a great big part of the church, and he learned he'd come to Christ before coming to the church, and had felt very convinced he should go to church. And so he was learning the story and found out it was through Joel Osteen. And so then here's this guy, and he goes, and I owe this guy coming to my church to Joel Osteen, who told him he should go to a church, and he showed up at mine. And so it's funny how we can think that, wow, we're doing this unconventional thing, and actually it turns out Joel Osteen sent him to us anyway. Or Rick Warren.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Rick.
That's crazy.
So, it's... But there, I'm sure there's... that temptation comes and goes, for sure. And but I assume... I don't know, have there been, seasons at the Village that you... because it sounds like by seasons, that could be an over-spiritualized word. I apologize. We're trying not to do that. But so you were more antagonistic, and then as time went on, the community built, where you've kind of been a little more because you guys have diversified, right? You've got more older folks now than you used to, and
I mean, the average age is still it's about 29 to 30.
Yeah,
but we're definitely more young families. I always joke because people come into our church, and if you would come in the first 5 years or 6 years, you probably would have seen, half the church with tattoos.
right.
Now, if you come in, it's really hard to find the tattoos. But if you go swimming, you find all the tattoos, because it's interesting. As they've gotten older, they dress in a way that covers a lot of their tattoos, whereas before and I think it's just been a natural transition, or kind of the people who have come, where they put their tattoos is they hide them.
They're more subtle.
Which I think, there's a lot going on there, but I think it's an interesting kind of way we've just changed as a culture in our community. And
yeah, we're the tattoo church now. So.
You are, and some of that's by...
not Brian and I.
No, I never had... No, I don't have any.
Yeah, I was going to say...
I don't know if I ever will. I'm not opposed to them. I think they're awesome, but...
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't have any...
you merged, which is with another church, which is something that we'll probably talk about in this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was definitely the tattoo church that you merged with, right? I think there were more tattoos in that church than in...
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think especially within our core team, I don't think there were... Yeah, the core leaders, there were 0 tattoos. And that was... with the church we merged with, that was actually, that was a prerequisite to leadership. I think, was to have a tattoo.
Have a tattoo.
Yeah.
Well, you
or
and I,
25 or
25 tattoos.
Yeah. So to cover up those tattoos, someday that means half our church is going to wear full body suits.
Yeah.
Just like adult jammies.
Well, when somebody in your church wears those rompers, the guys, then I'm really...
So did you see that worship leader romper?
Yes.
Was that Babylon B?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Yeah. It could happen.
Could happen, yeah. Mike and Brittany,
a stylish guy.
They might wear rompers, matching rompers together.
Yeah.
In fact, we can have them on the podcast, and I'll bring my Mevo camera if they'll wear the...
You just want to bring your camera.
I do. I just want to bring the camera. It's a pretty sweet camera.
Yeah, and the great thing is, Eric's a lot older than me, but technology wise, I don't even know how to work. I own the microphone we're podcasting on. I didn't know how to work it. Eric's got all kinds of gadgets, cameras, and flying. I don't know what drones. Do you have any drones?
No, I have one on my Amazon wish list. But
of course you do.
I have one too.
Do you have a drone?
No, I have
on the wish
one
list.
On my wish list.
I don't even have an Amazon wish list. That's how weird I see.
Dude, you're actually alternative to me, which is a little you're setting yourself apart.
I didn't want to mention that, but we had a conversation at our church about how to be the alternative to the village, and that's actually why they brought me on.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's why Brian's there and a few other people from my church who found the Mission Church better.
Sorry. We've talked about all this.
To be fair, I live probably almost within walking distance, depending on the average commitment of a person. But I live so close to the mission. I live just right around the corner. So
now I hear you're
changes
moving,
everything.
right?
Yeah, we're moving to
somewhere in Ajo.
We're going to the Saurita, basically.
So what times are you church? No, kidding.
Yeah, I think if Brian stays as the host, he's going to get teased a lot for not going to my church. That's okay.
That's all right. Well, hey, let's call it a wrap. I think that was
fun.
There you go. That's who we are. You'll hear more from us. We have a whole long list of stuff. I'm excited to talk about war with Eric, especially. He wants to delay that podcast. I want to do it now. There's all sorts of. We want to talk more about merging churches. We want to talk about a lot of stuff. And
we want to bring some guests on. Bring some musicians from our church to talk.
Yeah, maybe do some jams. Yeah.
Board games.
Yeah. One of our podcasts, we're just going to silently play a board game the whole time.
That would be pretty fun.
With the Mevo camera, and you can listen to it.
Or we could just commentate on the game while we play. It'd be great.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, Brian. Thanks for coming despite all your I hope your car's okay. I hope you're okay.
I'm fine.
Fine. Okay.
I'm more concerned about the car.
Yeah.
What's the plan now to get to the car? We might as well put this on the podcast.
Well, first I'm going to.
Do you need a ride?
I was going to take the bus because I don't want to impose, but I will. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. The plan will be to repair my bike, which is broken, for a tire as well, or the wheel itself. So I will fix that, and I will use that to transit to base.
Okay.
And then today, possibly, if I'll probably focus on sleeping since I did not do that yesterday, or tomorrow, I will be focused on figuring out what needs to happen with my car in terms of getting it from where it is and to whether the auto hobby shop on base or the Firestone, whoever will fix my car for the cheapest, if they can fix my car.
Yeah.
So
wow. Well, to the thousands of you listening out there, please call your local Firestone and tell them to fix Brian's car. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much.